Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to our show. Now, I am not a sex expert. I love me some Dr. Ruth, though, but I'm not Dr. Ruth. However, I have spent some time on this earth, and I've experienced some things, and I've witnessed some things. And because I am an excellent listener, I have heard some things. I'm a student of human behavior, and I love to learn. I love to research topics and present what I've learned, which is what I do on this podcast. And of course, I'm going to give my 2 cents about the matter. But I will also include what experts have to say. Now let's talk about sex. It's April 2020, and the world is in the middle of a global pandemic. We are asked to shelter at home and be isolated from folks outside of our homes. Some are more isolated than others, depending on your working status. Essential people are working and putting themselves at the front line of this COVID-19 virus. But if you're not essential and you live alone, this may be an extremely lonely time for you, especially if you're not sheltering with a boo or have access to a quarantine bay. This can not only be lonely times, but horny times as well. And the world has no idea how long we are going to be in this lonely, horny stay-at-home phase. The coronavirus pandemic is changing the way we have sex. Some have been having it in abundance, so don't be surprised to see a boom in pandemic babies. But for those who were not as fortunate to be sheltering with a sex partner, you might find this article I found interesting. NowToronto.com has an article entitled, "How the Coronavirus Pandemic is Changing the Way We Have Sex." The article suggests that this may have some lingering impact on how we think about intimacy. The article says, in his 2007 essay collection, Sex in Isolation, critic Bruce Benderson analyzes the rise of the digital age and the extinction of urban space. Extinction of urban space. He recalls spending a prolonged period of time in his New York City apartment in seclusion. One day mutually masturbating with a stranger via video conference on his computer. Without the global noise called life in America, he writes, my life in America has radically changed. In place of countless hunts in the streets of Midtown New York for sex, I've succumbed to these continuous electronic swaddlings. Naked but cocooned, I stay home, virtually caressing a supposed world in images. Why have I fallen and turned from a courageous voyeur and an armchair voyeur why have I fallen and turned from a courageous voyeur into an armchair voyeur? The answer to that is simple. I have nowhere to go. His screen project desire and become his screens project desire and become his new landscape as his cravings only build upon each other. It's why during what has only been a few weeks of self-isolation for most during the COVID-19 pandemic, many have felt such an itch, a horniness, if you will. Electronic swaddlings like swiping right on someone you may not be able to see for months, or FaceTiming with a partner who you may not be able to touch for months isn't enough. Touch keeps us healthy and, in fact, functions much like a painkiller. Now that's an interesting point I never thought about. Touch keeping us healthy. That's why this can be such a depressing time lack of touch. But back to the article. So countless studies have found that the more sex you have, the less stress you experience in daily life. A lack of it can contribute to depression. Even something as small as a hug can reduce physical and mental tension. So it's no surprise that for many, being apart from friends, family, and romantic partners has proved incredibly lonely. Being in an isolationship doesn't help. It's called skin hunger, says physician and sex educator Dr. Kim Alexander. That refers to our need for touch. Sex may help us live in the moment instead of worrying about the future. It may help us feel cared for and safe. It may help pass the long hours and be emotionally intimate in ways that our busy lives usually preclude. But being apart from your partner makes that kind of intimacy difficult. According to the New York City Public Health, the only public health agency to release sex guidelines during the pandemic, you can contract COVID-19 from a sexual partner who has it. So first, let's acknowledge how crazy it is that New York City Public Health is the only agency in this entire country to release sex guidelines. Do other states think that people aren't having sex? To come to think of it, other than staying 6 feet apart from people, I have had no instructions in regards to sex. So the Public Health in New York says that you can contract COVID-19 from a sexual partner who has it. So back to the article. While we know that it is spread through direct contact with saliva and mucus, it has not yet been found in semen or vaginal fluid. But we still have a lot to learn, the agency said. Yeah, there's a lot we don't know about this virus, and it's important that we keep that in mind. And even as we learn stuff, it's literally learning on the fly. Nothing has been tested and proven over a long period of time. It's just we're finding stuff out and we're throwing that info out real quick. So the guidelines recommend avoiding kissing people who are not in your closest social circle, abstaining from rimming, as the virus has been found in feces, wearing protection and washing hands and sex toys before and after sex. But as the guideline puts it, you are your safest sex partner. The next safest partners are the people you live with. NYC Public Health also advises people to avoid sex with anyone outside your home and ensure you have as few partners as possible. So, that sounds fine and dandy, but not everyone is sheltering with a partner. And yeah, I know I am my safest sex partner, but I've been having sex with myself for weeks now. So what am I, not I necessarily Gaelika, but I, a single representative for single people, supposed to do? Or what if I have a bae, but we live apart? We will get to that when we return. So let's take a break.
You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
So welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown, and we've been talking about how this pandemic is messing with our sex life. So what are we supposed to do when we are away from bae or don't have a bae? So what if you do not have a live-in sex partner, and this is going back to the article, or did not choose to quarantine with an early spring fling? Video dates, sexting, chat rooms, phone sex, and masturbation are a few options. The key, says Alexander, is maintaining a form of sensuality, which is what skin hunger is rooted in. Sensuality is important for well-being. When we're alone, we create comfort with the sensuality of food, scented candles, nice soap. Sensuality can also be a good solution for those craving intimacy, but finding themselves disconnected from their partners due to high levels of anxiety. Alexander references sex educator Emily Nagoski's brakes and gas pedals analogy to describe this dynamic. Brakes on means no libido. If you are not in the mood for sex, you don't want your partner to approach you for it because that adds a layer of guilt and shame that you're not fulfilling their needs. For some, the physical vulnerability of sex is what allows emotional vulnerability. So without sex, they feel alone and lost. Just be safe. If you're not feeling sexual, at least be sensual. Paraphrasing Nagoski, she adds, you might not want to go to the party, but once you're there, you'll probably have a good time. So drag yourself to bed, take your clothes off, put your skin next to your lover's skin, and see what happens. However, sex educator Samantha Biddy says that despite the number of rules and regulations we put on the table, there will always be those who cannot fight the urge and will come out of their 14-day self-isolation suffocated by the prospect of no end to the crisis in sight and decide to invite a hookup over. We're going to have a lot of people emerging, having communicated with people on dating apps or texted exes who are still planning to meet up, Biddy says. They're still negotiating risk, thinking, okay, so I've done my time. Can I fuck now? At that point, our criteria for sexual partners will also change in terms of living situations, what they do for a living and who they are in contact with. But what will remain consistent is the most important criteria: trust. What about people who live with or can't resist reuniting with partners who are frontline workers? These intersections in our interpersonal arrangements in an urban place like Toronto is something we have to talk about. Because if we don't, people are going to make up their own rules. They are going to fill in the blanks and do whatever fulfills their needs based on their individual risk assessments. We can't just talk about ideas and push abstinence, says Biddy. Public health's priority during pandemic is physical health, but mental, emotional, and spiritual health are important too. That's where self-care comes in, which places high value on not just touch, but relationships. As people are being forced inward, literally and emotionally, they're being forced to communicate in new ways. As Biddy says with a laugh, now I'm talking to people about what to do when you see your ex at the Zoom dance party. The hope, she says, is that when we come out of all this, we will have gained perspective in regards to fostering intimacy, We might even see a dip in fuckboyery, ghosting, and catfishing. That would be awesome, but I doubt it. I know there are dudes who are still fuckboying right now. Living in a city like Toronto. No personal experience, right? No malice, no. You didn't feel like the personal connection there. But living in a city like Toronto, which is defined by a sense of constant hustle and movement, can be extremely isolating as it is, Biddy says. Because of that, particularly as it relates to dating and sex, it is a wasteland at times. If meaningful connection is what we want, we should all be asking ourselves, what do I have to give versus what am I trying to find? Am I just trying to fill a void? As we become these reluctant armchair voyeurs, increasingly cognizant of our bodies and the lack of others around us, Biddy says our understanding of the importance of these things will pivot. The literal trauma of what it will inspire us to value connections in a different and hopefully better way. So yeah, it will definitely be interesting to see how we connect with others and value that connections once restrictions are done with it, and how we value those connections once these restrictions are done with. I think like everything, whatever we take with us out of this quarantine will eventually fade away. But let's get back to talking about sex. NowToronto.com also has an article entitled Sex in Self-Isolation, 4 Ways to Quench Your Thirst. If news reports, social posts, and metrics are anything to go by, a worldwide pandemic hasn't done anything to lessen the human need for connection, intimacy, and sex. If anything, self-isolation has amplified those needs. So how do we connect in an era of social distancing? We examine some technologies that, with some creativity and openness, can help create connections safely or make alone time much more fun. So there's dating apps. Relationship experts commonly advise that it's best to meet a potential partner in person as soon as possible. So are dating apps even useful at a time when people can't meet physically? Turns out daters are still finding ways to get to know each other via video apps like FaceTime and Zoom. A lot of folks who are just looking for hookups aren't going to be twirling the apps right now. Trawling the apps, TRAWLING. So you may find it more possible to forge deeper connections with others, says Come As You Are co-op Jack Lemmon. Wasn't he an actor? The Odd Couple? Similarly, if you're on a dating or hookup app and someone is pressing you to meet up, they may have poor judgment. If they're not great about taking precautions when there's a pandemic, they may not be great about safer sex practices either. Facts. So that's a good point about evaluating people's judgment. But I know there are people still hooking up via these apps during this pandemic, which just makes me feel upset that so many people are not being cautious and just like how, for lack of a better term, trashy people are. It's like, we're not in a pandemic. Let's just keep swiping on Tinder and doing Tinder hookups as if nothing is going on in the world right now. So for that one person who refuses to meet up to hook up, there's another person perfectly willing to meet up to hook up. For a lot of people, it's a numbers game. Shoot hella shots and see who's willing to hook up. Now back to the article. If, on the other hand, you're into the idea of an ephemeral encounter with someone you may never meet, sexting and phone sex are very viable options right now. Tinder and Bumble have reportedly seen longer conversations. Yeah, I don't know anyone having conversations on Tinder. But maybe I'm only aware of trashy people. But they've seen longer conversations and an increase in messages. And Field, spelled F-E-E-L-D, has created 3 specific virtual locations called Quarantine, Sext Bunker, and Remote Threesomes. That pool together open-minded folks from all over the world looking for remote fun. Taking the digital experience one step further, Field and design studio Moniker recently launched Field for Play. So that's F-E-E-L-D for Play. A site that allows up to 4 visitors to flirt via an anonymized video feed. Now that's interesting AF. Some creative things are coming out of this pandemic. Anonymous flirting. So I tried to check out the site, but it immediately asked for my camera and said, your video feed will be obscured, providing simultaneous exposure and privacy. I was curious, but not that curious to give them permission to use my camera and everything. Because it was immediate. Like, you can't just look around and see what's the haps. No, you're committing immediately. No, I was just trying to do some research. Not trying to partake. But as always, it's a good idea to keep safe sexting, pic sharing, and compassionate communication practices in mind. So let's take a break and return with more ways to quench your pandemic thirst.
I want to talk to you guys about this amazing product I've been using lately called Hydrant. If you're like me and you want to kick the coffee habit, but you're worried about your energy levels depleting, to avoid the morning sluggishness and that midday slump, you need to make sure you're hydrated. It's super important. And that's where I've been using Hydrant. And for 25% off your first order, you can go to drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC at checkout. Hydrant is basically flavored electrolyte packets you mix directly into your water to make hydrating your body easy and delicious. And what I love about Hydrant, it's backed by research. The formula was developed by Oxford scientists to provide perfectly balanced, efficient hydration. Again, that's drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC for 25% off your first order. Another really cool thing about Hydrant, there's no synthetic colors or artificial sweeteners. The formula is vegan and you can choose between 3 different flavors or a variety pack. So for all my vegan friendly fellows out there, this one's for you. Again, this is drinkhydrant.com and enter promo code GSMC.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Gaelika Brown. Here are more ways to quench your pandemic sex thirst. App-controlled sex toys. Teledildonics. That's what it says in parentheses, whatever that is. So sex toy sales are up around the world. And while a dildo, vibrator, sleeve, or butt plug is a no-brainer purchase for singles, there are also a variety of devices that can be operated remotely via phone apps if you're unable to see your lover or lovers during this self-isolation. WeVibe's flagship product was a couples vibrator that added an app control option in 2014. Folks in long-distance relationships often combine something like WeVibe vibrators. Kind of a tongue twister right there. At least a nice, good mouth exercise. WeVibe vibrators, and Skype or FaceTime to have sexual encounters remotely with each other. So mutual masturbation is wicked fun when you're in the same space, but the distance can actually make sex play even more intense and sexually charged. Remotely controlled sex toys can also be fun to play with as part of a DS dominant submissive relationship. If one partner is wearing something like the We Vibe Moxie or one of the classic insertable We Vibes, the other partner can in turn turn it on at unexpected moments and turn it off at inconvenient times. That's pretty crazy though, but you have to have it on you though. While We Vibes is widely considered the industry leader in this category, other brands with app-controlled devices include Mystery Vibe, Lovense, Lovense, and Oh My Bod, OHMIBOD. That's all one word. Now, so this really piqued my interest. I mean, someone can push a button from long distance and stimulate me. I mean, come on, folks. We gotta love technology. And I found a review about We Vibe. So here's what a woman writes. There comes a moment in any sex toy nerd's life when they discover a non-standard use for a toy and feel like a goddamn genius. How, you ask? Let me explain by first taking you back to a night sometime in late 2015. I'm pinned beneath my domly then fuck buddy in his big soft bed. He's fucking me and it feels fantastic. But without some clit stimulation, it's not gonna get me anywhere. I snake my hand down between us to rub my clit, but he barks. Did I say you can use your hand, little one? It's true, he didn't. And it's frustrating for both of us that I have to use my hand. Kink-wise, I'd rather have my arms pinned over my head, and he'd prefer us in that pose too. But without clit stim, orgasm is a sad impossibility for me. We eventually settle on a compromise. We squish my We Vibe Tango between us so it stays put to besides my clit, and he holds me down and fucks me. It works well enough. Okay, it works great. And I come all over his cock, panting and mellowing, and it's a flawed system. Neither of us can easily or quickly adjust the vibration strength, and our pelvises have to remain perfectly flush to keep the vibe where it needs to stay. Enter the We Vibe Sync. It's been over 2 years, and I'm not seeing that fuckboy anymore. But other domly princes have come along, and the sync has been there for us. It's my hands-free solution to the problem of the princess who needs clit stim to come, but wants to feel hopelessly trapped beneath her darling. The sync boasts another feature ideal for kink, the app through which it can be controlled via Bluetooth. Whether you or your beau are oceans apart and they're sitting beside you on the sofa, they can control the We Vibe using their phone. The app allows you to manipulate several pre-programmed modes, raising or lowering the strength of the two individual motors with a swipe of a finger. Or you can create your own modes, set the vibe to respond to the bassy thrum of music or sound, or use the touch mode to tap and swipe your partner into ecstasy. The novelty factor of this app cannot be oversold. You can deny your partner clitoral stimulation while thrumming on their G-spot to tease them into a frenzy. You can rub your phone screen like you'd rub your actual clit and coolly watch them squirm from across the room. You can send them a message in Morse code via vibration on their bits. The possibilities are infinite and could be very, very evil in the best possible way. So far, this sounds like the ultimate pandemic quencher to me. But let's find out what the third one is. Online erotica. Self-isolation is a great time to explore desires, turn-ons, and whatever sparks your erotic imagination. Pornhub saw a spike in traffic in March, but for those inclined to slow down, there's a plethora of erotic film, art, and reading available online. Phile, Phile, The partially Toronto-based International Journal of Desire and Curiosity recently compiled a selection of erotic video, art, films, and clips available to view on their website. Content ranges from their own shorts to queer and cult classic cinema. The streaming service Canopy, which is free and accessible through basically any public library with a library card. If you have a public library card, then you can access Canopy. It hosts thousands of films. So plug the word erotic into the search function and you'll find offerings from traditional documentaries to campy vintage softcore, European or Euro porn to interviews and films profiling a desired range of photographers and artists like Helmut Newton, Nobushi Araki, Robert Mellenthrop, Chris Opie, Tom of Finland, and Lenora Carrington. I don't know who any of these people are. Literacy erotica has been a popular alternative to controversial pornography, and in the 2 years since its launch, Dyspia has become the most talked about audio app thanks to their well-pronounced sexy short stories, and that's spelled Dipsia, Dipsea, or maybe it's just Dipsy. Spelled like C, Dipsy, I don't know. So Mal Journal, M-A-L Journal, which is supported by the dating app Field, the one we talked about earlier, the F-E-E-L-D, publishes essays, fiction, and poetry themed around radical approaches to sexuality, gender, and the erotic. Browse writing from issues featuring authors Shia Hedi, Aline Miles, and Natasha Stagg are on their website. Again, don't know any of these people. So the other option is online learning and podcasts. You can spend a lifetime learning about yourself, and sex ed doesn't have to end with high school. There are so many amazing online sex workshops, says Lamin. We could not recommend Luna Matatis more highly. Luna and then Matatas. She's wonderful and has great workshops on so many topics that can be attended solo or with a partner near or far. In terms of podcasts, the Science of Sex, the Pornhub podcasts, New Books in Gender Studies, and History is Gay are just a few of the places to hear informed folks talk about the spectrum of human sexuality from a multitude of perspectives encompassing psychology, history, and technology and pop culture. So yeah, sheltering at home can get boring and lonesome, and orgasms are a healthy release of stress. So maybe you can take advantage of this time to find creative ways to orgasm and learn about yourself at the same time. I definitely appreciate your time. I thank you for listening to the GSMC Sex Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Until next time, I'm Gaelika Brown.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.